Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are, Facebook. We don't care. We're just glad that you're here. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. For those that don't know me, and I don't know why you wouldn't, with all the hate mail that I get, my name is Ren Jones. I'm a certified personal trainer, certified corrective exercise specialist, certified nutrition coach, and a certified women's coaching specialist through Girls Gone Strong. I'm
Yay for Girls Gone
Yay,
Strong.
yes, they're the best. And for those that don't know, as we're doing this live recording, this will be the launch of my podcast. And what a proper way to launch a podcast by having an incredible interview with a Northern lass. And I just happened to back my way accidentally by luck into an interview with the incomparable Amanda Thebe, author of the best-selling book Menopcalypse, which I love so much. Amanda, oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And you said my name right and you said the book right, which is like a
Yes,
big win in my mind. So thank you.
yes,
And I'm your inaugural guest. I didn't know that. So well done on the launch of your podcast.
yes. It's gonna be a big deal. It's gonna be a big deal. So, for those that aren't familiar with Amanda, and I don't know how you couldn't be, unless you're a man. But for those that aren't familiar with Amanda, we're talking. Not only do we have a coach here, we love to talk about coaching in the context of all the live broadcasts that I do, but more so in the podcast, that's going to be a recurring theme. Is that sort of the lens of coaching? But not only do you have a coach, we've got a graphic designer, right? We've got a black belt in karate who's already threatened twice to whoop me should I get out of line here.
Did
So
I
I'm be
do
on our
that?
best friend. Yeah,
That sounds like I would do that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But we've also got a tremendous author, Mom Human, that's going to give us some insight. I first came in contact with Amanda through our a group that we're both in, Precision Nutrition. That's how I first learned of who she was. Right, had people making mention of her in the group
Oh, I
whenever there
didn't
was a
realize
reference.
that.
Yeah,
I didn't
when
realize that, Ryan.
when
Yeah.
there was a reference or request about any issue along the menopausal spectrum, oftentimes our colleagues in that group, because we both share a certification, would mention her name. Then I got more familiar through a mutual friend, Steph Gaudreau, and then I posted some ridiculous nonsense, a slow jam, baby.
Oh my
That
God. That was like the funniest thing, your slow jam. You're a rock star.
and she commented, and that was all. That was all the gateway that I needed to annoy her for the rest of her life. I will continue to do so. So,
Please.
Amanda, I want to know first. I want you to give us your introduction of yourself because I think there's always different perspective as a person who is gushing over you like myself would introduce. But you tell us who you decide describe yourself to be.
Well, I sound pretty awesome the way you introduced me. I have to say, I'm impressed with me. No, a very similar background to you. So, personal trainer, nutrition coach, also a published author of the book, as you said, Menopcalypse. I have a whole ton of like subspecialties. I think we all do in this industry. I've worked with postpartum women. I've worked with seniors. I've worked with the NBA Rockets, by the way, when I was in Houston, which was very cool, a good opportunity for me. So I've worked on like a spectrum of different clients, from general population to athletes. And I also feel like I came into this space as a really well-educated woman on women's health until something happened and I didn't know anything about it. And I think that's essentially why we're talking today. And so why I talk about menopause is because I was sort of hit with a sledgehammer of perimenopausal symptoms that floored me and had me stuck for a couple of years without any help from the medical community, not because they weren't trying to help me, but because they didn't know what was going on. And I just was really frustrated and furious that something was happening to me that happens to all women. And I was blindsided by it. And so essentially, I've sort of come out the other side as being what I would call a menopause advocate, educator, because I really just want women to understand that this isn't just simply a time where you stop getting your periods and you're an old woman in a rocking chair, I suppose, like knitting. Although that sounds actually really nice to me, if I'm completely honest. And I just think that in the fitness world, especially, we're always just taught to just carry on with what you're doing, just
Mhm.
keep doing the same thing, and that there's no difference in menopause. And in fact, I had my very first mansplainer the other day on YouTube say to me, "Why are you even saying you're menopausal? Nothing happens. Just stop whinging and get on with it." And I just was like, okay, Fred, whatever your name is. But I think that if we can bring the nuance into the conversation in the fitness world and just sort of say, hey, we know this is what happens on a physiological level, we actually change our women's bodies completely change through perimenopause and menopause. So let's have that conversation, and then let's help coaches understand how they can be better at serving this vast majority of their clientele.
I love that explanation. Um, I often say that I believe that when a coach gets to that next level, that big level of coaching, it's predicated on solving an issue that they were at some point themselves frustrated with or
Yeah.
suffered through. I think that's when the passion for a great coach comes about, when they have the opportunity to save somebody else from something that they experienced that they didn't like. But you provided a great segue here, because I recently gave a talk at a women's retreat. A great friend of mine, who's also a colleague, Trish, asked me to come down and speak at a women's retreat. And I asked early on, ladies, if you've had this conversation about this change process, the spectrum of menopause, with a
Yeah.
medical professional, show your hands. No hands went
No
up.
hands.
No
Yeah.
hands. I said, okay. I was shocked by that, because everything in wellness is geared towards men. So, because of that privilege, we assume that everybody is equally treated until otherwise we are confronted with it. So, I said, second question, ladies. If you've talked with this to an elder woman in your family, someone along the lineage of your family line,
Yeah.
and they gave you sort of a what to expect, why to expect, when to expect, raise your hand. No hands went up. So I was wondering if we could start at the most basic level, and something I've heard you talk about. Could you just briefly, well, you don't briefly do anything, Amanda, but could could you, in the amount of time that you feel appropriate, just explain to the listeners out there what the difference is between the three facets of what we generally in totality menopause?
Yeah. I don't say things quickly. I mean, I know I'm a bit of a gobshite, but it's fine. It's fine. I own it. So
It's
we
perfect.
have three stages of menopause that I think that we should all talk about, so that we're all on the same playing field, that we're singing from the same hymn sheet, essentially. So perimenopause is the time leading up to menopause. It potentially lasts between 8 to 10 years and can start in our late 30s. Now, this is the time when estrogen start and progesterone, I should say, start to decline, because we're going to come to the end of our reproductive life. And so I always say, like, progesterone is like a slide that goes down, and then estrogen is like this roller coaster. And it's really the roller coaster in unpredictability of estrogen fluctuating that causes these symptoms in women that make no sense at all. It's almost like whack-a-mole crazy, right? We've got all of these symptoms happening. And so this usually is the most symptomatic time of a woman's menopausal experience.
Mhm.
And the symptoms, they say there's 34 symptoms, but it's 34 plus, plus, plus. I mean, it depends who you speak to. But some of the symptoms don't make any sense at all. We've got neurological changes that look like brain fog, depression, anxiety, migraines in my case, hot flashes because our thermoregulatory system is in our brain, cold flashes, night sweats. And then we've got like physical symptoms as well, like joint pain, gut pain, heart palpitations. The symptoms go on and on. There's some crazy symptoms out there like burning tongue, tinnitus, and odd symptoms, itchy, scratchy skin. But then, there's also the emotional component as well, where we see women really not feel like they can cope because of, essentially all of these symptoms, potential outside life stresses, and also just don't recognize themselves, lose confidence, lose self-esteem. I think that they're pretty common sort of traits of perimenopause. And
Mhm.
then you move forward to menopause, which is essentially a timestamp. And so that timestamp is that you look back retrospectively and say, oh, it's been 12 months since I've had a menstrual cycle, therefore I am. And then, but there isn't like a marching band down the street, there's no fireworks, it's a pretty ordinary day as it goes. But it does sort of mark the time when we're at the end of our reproductive life, and then anything after that is considered to be post-menopause or being menopausal. They're
Mhm.
sort of interchangeable, and what we see in that time is that things start to adjust. Our brain actually changes shape and structure in perimenopause, and in postmenopause, in those 3 to 5 year window after menopause, the brain readapts, rebounds, so to speak. So a lot of women feel like their symptoms start to subside, and statistically, that's what we see with women. But we're now in this new hormonal landscape with very low levels of our reproductive hormones, and estrogen being a very protective hormone. And it's also an anabolic hormone. So it's the building hormone. And so things like muscle strength, bone health, heart health, brain health are all things that we have to actively do as women to take care of our future health, to sort of bulletproof ourselves for longevity. And it's where the coaches can play a great part in this, because we know how important lifestyle is for preventing future diseases and for improving longevity. Whether you're on hormone therapy or not, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But
Right.
yeah, so they're the three stages: before, during, and after.
I love that. And we're going to circle back around to that. It's so shocking to me how restrictive the conversation is around this subject. Again, as a man who has the privilege of research, 80-90% of all research right here, guys, dedicated to folks like
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
Whether it's sexual, reproductive, pharmaceutical, all of it, just this guy, right? So it's so shocking to me to hear this. I want to follow up that question with something else really quickly, because what I love about your book was, I've read sort of three cornerstone texts for me to come up to speed as a man, as a cisgendered heterosexual man.
yeah.
Sort of my three pillars have been Dr. Jen Gunter, Dr.
Awesome.
Stacy
She's
Sims.
she's the goat.
She's God, and you. Now, what I loved about Jen Gunter's book is very much clinical, right,
Yeah,
in its approach.
yeah,
You there's a few paragraphs you'll have to read twice if you're a dumb guy like me.
yeah,
What I love about Dr. Sims is that it's almost immediately projected towards athleticism, as a personal trainer, corrective exercise specialist who only seems to attract type A women. That was very helpful for me because they just want to go, 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 and
yeah.
they don't want to slow down for anything. But what I loved about your book so much was, as a person who cannot experience this, and maybe for women in reproductive years who have not yet experienced it, what I got from your book was the reality of the human aspect. I remember sitting thinking about the story you told about having one whole son who you forgotten had played an entire sport. You totally forgot that your son played basketball as you're watching another son play basketball, and
Oh,
the
he
fear
was.
in thinking that something very critically wrong, and we're going to get to that 2 year period, but that something was really so wrong with you in terms of maybe Alzheimer's, dementia. That personalization of the way you explain things for me is the reason why I'm giving away three of those books today. And the
Oh, that's
reason why I
awesome.
think so many people need to read it, because even you yourself admitted to a certain lack of empathy for this time period of life. when you had not yet experienced it. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's such a I you really did read the book. That's amazing. And I agree with it. Like, so Dr. Jen Gunter is like a personal hero and now friend of mine, and I like that she stays factual and clinical, and she's still compassionate, and she understands this from the medical text. Dr. Stacey Sims is doing amazing work with her research on athletes. But when I was thinking about writing a book, I was doing a lot of research. At the time, Stacey's was the only book that was out, and that was called Raw, and it had a
Hmm.
small element of menopause in it. Jen Gunter's book wasn't out at the time when I was researching, and I could only find medical textbooks. And I really struggled to absorb the information in them because
Hmm.
my cognitive ability was impaired. I don't even know how else to describe it, but I couldn't remember stuff. I had to write everything down. I am very analog. I like everything written down, but and I just was like, this is too much information and it's not sticking. And then on the other side, all the other books were either flippant or they were like comedies, and they were almost dismissive in its nature. And I was like, I need to fill the gap with a human real book that talks about it from evidence-based standpoint. And I know you'll appreciate that. So I reached out to all of the different experts, but it was real and it came from my heart. And that was what the publisher wanted. He wanted a book with my voice and my experience. And it was hard to write. There were times I was
Hmm.
writing and crying my eyes out. It was that thing with my son, though. It was one of the funniest experiences, but also not very funny.
Hmm.
So I was sat watching my youngest son play basketball with Akeem Olajuwon next to me, by the way, because his grandson went to my kid. Don't even ask. I was like, he looks like he's a basketball player. My kids are like, yeah. And Johnny Dang was there too. You know, Johnny Dang, who does all of the. Anyway, so that was the kids' school that I was at. And I was saying to my oldest son, oh, it's so great watching Elan play basketball. I really enjoy experiences like this because I've only ever seen you play football. And he went, Mum, I played basketball in middle school. And I went, no, you didn't. He went, I did. And you came to watch me. Don't you remember? I got like three pointers in a row. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And he went, have you really just forgotten about 2 years of my life? And I was thinking, I actually think, and I didn't remember. And he was so disappointed in me. And I went, it doesn't mean I don't love you. I just actually haven't got a recollection. So we had to dig through photographs and I had to look at the photographs and I saw, and the thing that made me remember is I saw somebody else's kid and I remember speaking to him saying, how you doing? How's your mum and dad? Say hi. And that's the thing I remembered. And I just was absolutely horrified thinking, is this how my brain works now? I actually can't
Yes.
remember stuff. And it was very, very scary. But he hasn't let me forget that, by the way. He tells me, do you remember the time that I didn't play basketball? Yeah.
That it's so amazing, and hats off to your publisher and to yourself, obviously, because and I'm going, well, I don't know why I was about to say I'm going to use a swear word, but I've forgotten who I'm talking to, Amanda. No disrespect.
Don't
um
apologize.
but
No.
but that's the shit that we need in these conversations,
Yeah.
to remember that there's a human at the
Human.
center of it,
Yeah.
at the middle of all this clinical estrogen, progesterone, it's estrogen receptor. There's a person there having that experience. And my favorite thing about what you've written and the way that you've written it is I think it allows someone who's not yet had the experience to be informed and also empathetic. And in coaching, we come from precision nutrition background.
Yeah.
In our context, is client centered and motivational interviewing, and allowing someone to absorb and shift their mindset based on new information. It's sort of how we operate, much more than a telling and a finger wagging. But I love that about your book. I want to step into what I believe is the center of the Menopcalypse, as described in the title of the book. Yes, yes. So, you know, I'd read a lot before I read your book, and thought I understood a lot. Every single thing that you listed during that coveted 2 year period, I had never heard of or encountered in text before. So, I know I'm a boxing fan, right?
Yeah.
I actually have two boxing certifications. I worked with
Awesome.
Tony Jeffries, who's
Yeah.
Olympic bronze medalist, and I took his course live twice. Got to meet him, awesome guy. And I know how good boxing is for cognitive awareness, et cetera, et cetera. I never knew that boxing was such a key to literary genius because this book
Yeah.
almost happened exclusively because you were punching a bag one day and went home. And can you tell us about the 2 years or so after you got home from that boxing class?
And it's exactly that. Like, it's crazy that, like, so I had my martial arts background, so I like to hit things hard and, put a lot of effort into my workouts. And I was 42 and I went to my regular boxing class, worked really hard, felt amazing until I didn't. And then I went home and I just didn't feel well, Ren. I just was like, oh, I feel a bit off. I maybe pushed too hard. I feel a bit bagged, essentially. So I
Mhm.
went to lie down and I couldn't get back up again. The bed was spinning. I started to the worrying thing is I started to lose feeling in half of my face.
Mhm.
When I touched my face, I couldn't feel it, and the whole of the back of my neck and my face just felt like it was in a clasp. I couldn't even really describe it, but it ran down my body into my hand. I lost feeling in my hand and I just was like, holy crap, what's going on? Then couldn't walk properly. I had to crawl on my hands and knees. It just was very extreme for someone who's never been sick that much in their life.
Mhm.
Um, and it went on for a couple of days. It didn't sort of get any better. And then when it did get better, I felt like I had like a hangover for a few days. It wiped me and it took a long time to recover. And I thought, oh, you know what? It was a virus. It was a bug. I can just move on from that. And then it happened again, but it happened again without the boxing. Like, it just happened for no reason whatsoever. And I couldn't work out what was happening. And so I decided I needed to go to the doctor. And so I did. I went to my GP, who listened to me and said, listen, I'm not sure what's going on with you, but you need to go and see a neurologist. So I got a referral, but unfortunately the referral was like months away. You know how these things are. And so
Yep.
I just ended up just being sort of left without knowing what was going on. And it became a real worrisome thing for me to deal with. And just not being able to walk in a straight line without having to hold on to things. I just thought, I like, maybe I had MS or something. Like, I was like,
Mhm.
why is it that, like, my body's starting to break down? But then I'd have good days and I'd be able to do my workout and recover fine. So it didn't make any sense. Eventually I went to emergency care because I just was really not doing so well. I'd had a bad episode in a car driving where I felt like I was going to lose control because, I just, things were just feeling overwhelming for me. And my cousin took me to the hospital where she worked, and I got into the system. And I felt really guilty doing that, if I'm completely honest. But we're talking 8 or 9 months into me having these recurring episodes it was almost chronic by this stage. So I got in the system and then spent up to 2 years having tests with neurologists, like MRI scans, CAT scans, ear, nose, throat doctors that induced vertigo into me. And they just were just trying to get to the root cause of what was happening. And every time it came back inconclusive. And I was told that everything looks fine, but I wasn't fine. And, I also looked okay as well because I was fit, I was healthy, I didn't look sick, but I just wasn't right. And I just kept saying, I'm not making this up. This is actually happening to me. And then I went to a gynecologist just about something else completely. And he saw something was wrong. He looked at me and said, what's going on? And I started crying and gave him like the whole sort of spiel. And ultimately he said, listen, this is perimenopause and I see this day in and day out. I can help you. I can really help you. And he sort of identified that it was migraines with aura, which was the loss of feeling and vision problems. I had vertigo and that I had depression. And the depression was like something that I think I was in denial about because I didn't know what depression felt like. And so I couldn't articulate it, but I'd withdrawn from life completely.
Mhm.
So, whilst it was a relief to know that he identified what this was, it was a relief to start with. He said, this is perimenopause. And I'm scratching my head thinking, what on earth does that mean? I've never heard of it. I also was really pissed off. I just was
Mhm.
like angry that I'd had 2 years with nobody helping me because nobody knew what it was. And I didn't know it from a coach's perspective. Like, we work with women day in and day out. And I
Right.
had no idea that what I was dealing with were perimenopausal symptoms. And that's essentially why I sort of fell down that slippery rabbit hole, because I just was like, I felt completely alone and isolated, almost disappeared from existence for 2 years. And I know that it can't just be me. And so I sort of put a call out to other women. Am I the only one? And so, and because of that, I ended up building a fairly large community, and it really is a community. You can't sell anything in my groups. It's just like, please talk to other women and let them realize they're not alone, you know?
Absolutely. Can you shout out the community? Because I love the name of the community. Can you shout it out?
It's called Menopausing So Hard.
Love that so
I know, it's
much.
so cool. And so, I actually don't spend a lot of time in there because I had to pull back a little bit, because some of the stories I was hearing were so emotional. I was crying every day reading some of these
Hmm.
stories. So I have a team of administration run it for me now, because I had to remove myself somewhat from it, because it was stopping me moving forward with myself. Like, I can't take on everybody else's problems type thing,
Mhm.
but I also wanted a safe space for them. And so I actually wanted to call my book Menopausing So Hard, because I didn't like the name Menopcalypse. I thought it
Mhm.
sounded too desperate. I thought it sounded too negative. But the publishers were like, we love it. We love it because you're actually saying it felt like the menopcalypse, but you can come through this, and I'm going to show you how.
Let me just say, when I read that section of the book, it immediately clicked for me how appropriate the name of the book was. I will not sugarcoat it. When I first read the title, I was like, "Man, apocalypse. Okay, that's a bit harsh. This is a
Yeah.
natural physiological process that all
Yeah.
women go." But as I'm reading this 2 year period, can would you do us a favor? Just sort of shake down the almost exhaustive list of what you experienced symptomatically, because estrogen runs through nearly every system, right? And there are receptors nearly every. There's just no end to from tip of the toe to tip of the nose. There's just no end what could possibly happen individually for a woman. But what's the laundry list that you experienced?
Yeah, the things that I experienced, and we know there's potentially 30 odd more symptoms, and I could basically tick them all off. But so essentially, I had the migraines, vertigo, I had depression, I had some anxiety, but not a lot. I experienced some insomnia, but not as extreme as some women, I know for sure. I had gut issues, really bad gut issues. I did have some joint pain, but that resolved itself. And I think strength training plays a huge part in that for sure. I had, let me keep thinking, I had, the itchy skin. It's called formication, not fornication, by the way, with an M, but formication. And that was almost like little ants running underneath your skin, and you can't relieve it. I would have my gums were bleeding more. I had dry eyes. My histamine intolerance changed. I'd never had allergies. I suddenly was allergic to horses and grass, and
Wow.
it was crazy. And the thing is, we know is that estrogen impacts about 200 systems in our body. So during the transition of perimenopause, all of these symptoms come and go and come and go, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? And so they're essentially, and one of the actual main symptoms I had was the genital urinary symptoms of menopause,
Mhm.
or vaginal atrophy, which isn't really a very good term for it because it impacts more than that. I remember you read this in the book. I decided to talk about everything. Nothing was left uncovered. I
Your
like
poor
to run.
sons.
I know my two. Oh, I'll tell you a funny story actually, if you come back to it, about my poor sons. But I talk about, I was going to call it "Let's Not Beat About the Bush," because I was going to talk about my vagina and my vulva, but we didn't go with that
Clever.
topic because it's more than just the bush, Ren.
Right. Right.
But
Indeed. Indeed.
indeed, but I went for a run when I was in Scotland, and when I finished the run, my kids were playing football, soccer, with my husband, and I looked down and I peed myself, and I was like, what, I've peed myself. I've had two kids and was perfectly fine, but all of a sudden I'm peeing myself. What on earth's going on? There's estrogen receptors around the whole area, the whole integrity of the vagina and the vulva, and the amount of symptoms that can happen to a woman is it's awful, and it can impact their quality of life. It's not just dryness, it's painful sex. They might have some tearing or some
Mhm.
reduction and some shrinking, um, re- recurring urinary tract infections, bacterial infections. It goes on and on and on. So I actually needed to sort of get some help for that too. And that help came from a medical perspective, but also from a pelvic floor physiotherapist,
Mhm.
which I wish all women could have access to, because it's
Yes.
not just do more Kegels. Please stop saying
Yes.
that. You know,
Yes.
and in fact, these symptoms, the genital urinary symptoms of menopause, don't just come and go. Like, a lot of the symptoms can resolve themselves, but this is sort of around to stay, and women need to
Mhm.
be proactive with their vaginal health,
Yeah,
essentially.
absolutely. I had the great pleasure of interviewing in a live broadcast my good friend Kim Vopney, who goes by Vagina
Yeah,
Coach. On
yeah.
the great conversation. As a matter of fact, I replayed that for my community just last week. I will oftentimes replay it, and uh, the more I think and get educated about the population that I serve, which is primarily moms over 30,
Yeah.
the more pissed off I get daily. I
Yeah.
just get more and more angry. And my background is that I lost two sisters to lifestyle related issues and lost my mother to lifestyle related
Oh,
issues. That was my entrance into this
supporting the
community.
female
Yeah,
community.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but thank you so much, because I think it's important for women to be more specifically in tune with the differentiation in what their body's doing than
Yes.
to be so locked into the standard thought of what a symptom should be of this transition in life. Knowing your body is really a good key here.
It's becoming your own sort of personal detective,
Hmm.
and you've nailed it on the head, because we have this list of symptoms, but it may feel different to me than it would to somebody else, and it's always about talking to the one person in front of you. Our needs are
Hmm.
going to be different, our experiences are going to be different, although it's a shared experience as well, of course. That's why open communication and community is so key. I think that you literally can't do without it, because it might just take one person to say, have you thought about going to a menopause specialist, because maybe
Hmm.
they can help you? Have you thought about increasing your protein so you're not having such sugar dips and, silly
Yes.
things? But I wondered, when you read the book, if you found that, like, the second part of the book, it must have all been such knowledge too that you already had, because when I dug deep into the research, ran for like what menopausal women need, there are
Hmm.
nuances there without a doubt, but the
Yes.
basics work. And most of the women that I know don't truly understand the basics of the 5 tenets of health, like basically looking after our stress and sleep quality, like
Hmm.
thinking about eating
Hmm.
a well balanced diet and moving more,
Hmm.
including strength training where possible, things that we know have actual outcome impact that's been studied. And so I am assuming the second part of the book to you was already known.
It was a regurgitation of sort of the core tenets that we both learned through becoming
Yeah.
qualified fitness professionals, but also
Yeah.
nutritional
The
professionals as
nutrition. Yeah.
well. What the connection for me was, and I got this through all of those three sort of core tenets of menopause education. Again, you and Dr. Jen Gunter and Dr. Stacey Sims.
So, yeah.
What was connecting for me was how the withdrawal of estrogen affects those specific things, whether it be ghrelin and leptin, your whether it be your sleep response, melatonin, cortisol, whether it be actin and myosin, and your ability to contract a muscle in the most potent way. Those things were so crucial for me. And you've made a good segue here, because I want to tap your mind for something else. And this
Yeah.
is more so a thought experiment. I love American football. I always have. I'm not a football player. I'm a band geek, as a matter of fact. But I can't watch more than 20 minutes of football without learning about the dysfunction of a gray-haired man's penis in separate bathtubs, holding hand with a fairly lovely lass, right? Erectile dysfunction is everywhere. I
Oh, you
know.
mean on the ads?
Oh
The
yeah, on the ads, yeah. I watched two segments of football, and somebody's holding hands with someone in separate bathtubs. The next scene, they're playing golf. All these euphemisms for sex, right?
yeah.
They're flying a kite, and she's holding it, right? How is it that the average 15-year-old boy knows more about erectile dysfunction than the average midlife woman knows about the time of life that she's entering in 2023? How is it possible that perimenopause is still blindsiding women in an information age? What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I mean, I've got lots of thoughts on that, but it's exactly right. I mean, well, I think from a medical perspective, it's never been considered a medical condition, and it sort of isn't. But I mean, if you think about puberty and even dying, there are things that can be, nobody should suffer through those, but there's medical help needed there if needed. And while for the most part menopause is a life transition, of course there's some women that get into forced menopause because of surgery or cancers, etc. But if you go through the natural process, it can be extremely challenging and impactful, and women don't know about it. And I think that one, there's no training for our primary caregivers. There's none. It's not even in the medical curriculum.
Mhm.
And OBGYNs, I think something like only 10% of the of OBGYNs will get training in this, and they have to opt to do this. And we're talking about hours. We're not talking about weeks and months. It's just but at least there's people that are trying to learn. And then, in our school system, when we have our sex ed classes, whatever they're called, in the US, we have we talk about the female reproductive system, don't we? Like, we learn about them because remember all the giggles in the classroom. And
Still giggling now.
we snigger, yeah. And but menopause isn't even in that textbook, apart from in the UK, where one of the best campaigners, Diane Danzebrink, actually got it into the curriculum.
Mhm.
My niece was furious. I sat down with her and my mum, and I went, "Why am I the person talking about menopause? It wasn't on my bucket list at all, ma'am." And she was like, "Well, I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I couldn't talk to your nan about it." And it was horrible for me. And she didn't go on hormone therapy because she was one of the cohorts that were, within the WHI. We have to stop
Yes.
giving hormone
Yes.
therapy. So and I also remembered that, and I was like, you can only take natural supplements. I remember being on a case about it.
Right.
And then my niece was furious. She was like, well, this shit's not going to work for me. That I want to know about it. Tell me, what do I got to do? How do I learn about it? And
Right.
so I think that there's this massive knowledge gap that we know still exists, even though there's people like me, Jen and Stacey, and a whole bunch of other women
Hmm.
talking about it, and gentlemen too, right? But
Hmm.
there's this massive knowledge gap, and it's like, how do we fill that? How do we have the conversations where it's not uncomfortable to talk about menopause or vagina? Like, the first time I said those two words on TV, I was like, okay, I can say that now. But I think that I now have a husband who is menopause informed. I have
Hmm.
two boys that know
Yes.
about it because they're forever rolling their eyes going, oh, mom's in menopause again or whatever. But they know about it, right? And it's supportive, like when they know for potential partners or daughters, nieces, whatever, for the next generation. And I think that because there's a whole bunch of us now have actually opened that door and decided that we are going to talk about it, it's
Hmm.
actually becoming more mainstream. We're seeing it on TV. There's more books out there now. It's on radio shows. And so we're definitely seeing a movement towards it. And all we're asking is for people to just pause and listen, right?
Exactly.
Instead of ignoring us and making
Hmm.
us feel embarrassed about it, right? It's why I've been doing workplace talks, because workplace is a place where a
Right.
lot of women can suffer,
Brilliant.
and now managers and executives are saying, right, tell us what we need to do. You just need to learn. You just need to have a supportive environment, give them educational resources, support them. It's not
I,
difficult.
I wish that I had time for that portion of the conversation, particularly as an American, right? Corporate America misses the ball in many ways,
All the time.
but
Yeah.
one of the more significant is that there's an entire population of employees and executives who are struggling during their work day. just to complete their work. And I read a stat about the X amount millions of dollars that are reduced from the national economy just because of the ineffective amount of empathy for women who need to tend to their health on any particular day or
Yeah.
at any particular moment during the workday, and feel the stigma of even mentioning something uh, because it will be ill perceived. Speaking of stigma,
And ill received
ill
as well.
received.
Yeah.
Speaking of stigma, and this may be our last
Okay.
conversational point because I know you've got to go. And thank you so much for your time up to this point. I want to talk a little bit about stigma because you and I know as wellness professionals, we're always trying to assist our client in living their healthiest way.
Right.
And oftentimes there are subject matters that they feel shunned when having the conversation. For instance, therapy, just
Yes.
therapy in general. I know you know this, and I'll say it for most of the coaches out there and the people who aren't listening. There are very many people that will come to a fitness and wellness professional that should probably first have a mental wellness intervention, right? They come to us to solve. They think the 5 kilos or 10 stone or 30 pounds, whatever it may be, will solve some of their sort of self-reflective, hiccups, right?
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
lose weight, I'll feel better about myself, and they
Hmm.
should probably start with the inside through therapy. You had an interesting intersection as you went through those 2 years that we talked about. And I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this question, but I got immediately curious reading that and then subsequently hearing you talk about it on other podcasts. You had the intersection one of there was some depression and the
Yes.
stigma of what mental wellness is and taking medication for mental wellness. You
Yes.
also had the intersection of ageism, right? This is old lady shit that I'm dealing with right now. How dare you? I'm young and vibrant and moving and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want to be categorized as some gray haired old lady. And then there was the third intersection of sort of our our belief in our wellness ability. And I see so many women that I work with in this spectrum telling me, well, I won't have to deal with that because I'm exercising and I eat well. They think that menopause is a diseased state. And somehow by being good in wellness, they can avoid it. So you had but I'm a fit person stigma.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
had, but I'm a young person stigma. And then you had, but I'm a mentally healthy person stigma. Do the stigmas that we often associate sort of do they complicate this time in a woman's life, in your opinion?
That's like one of the best questions I've ever been asked. That's so cool. And you took that from the book, and you've and maybe I've never even thought about it that way. And I think you've nailed it on the head. But I think it comes from the idea that what was happening I didn't know about, right?
Hmm.
And so when I did know about it, I definitely went straight to blame. I was like, why am I struggling as much as I am when I've invested so much time and health and energy in my body? Why have I got depression when
Hmm.
like I don't have anything to be depressed about? I literally looked around me and thought, would I change anything here? No. Like there was nothing I would change. And that was like really difficult for me to get my head around, thinking, why am I depressed when I'm should be happy? Right? That didn't make any sense to me. And also, I'm only 42, 44, whatever. Like it shouldn't be happening to me. Is there a problem with me? And so I'm absolutely certain that I got in my own way. That the reason that I couldn't sort of move forward initially was because I was like, this isn't fair. This doesn't make sense. And I remember speaking to somebody once who was a menopause doctor in the UK who does yoga. And she went to this yoga conference and spoke. And then afterwards in the restaurant, the yogis were drinking their green smoothies and going, well, I'll be fine because, I do yoga and drink green smoothies. Well, you're not going to green smoothie your way out of menopause. It's, I mean, statistically, we know that 75% of women are going to struggle with menopausal symptoms of some respect, 5 to 7 symptoms, but then 25% it will impact their quality of life. And even if you're healthy and well, genetics play a huge portion in this, right? We can't like remove that from the conversation. But what I did notice though is that while like exercise and nutrition didn't feel like they were going to really help me, they definitely did, and it was a really difficult like journey I had to have to get there. First of all, I was like, well, the reason I'm not feeling as good as I can is potentially because I'm not exercising or eating as well, because I'm in such a dire state with my body. So what can I do to relieve some of these symptoms first, so I can then get back on the horse with eating well and exercising intelligently? And then so I had to go down like the medical route for that, for sure. And then in align with that, I didn't go to therapy, but I have a best friend who is a psychologist, and I used to just have these really great conversations with her. And she said, what people need to do as they get older, and probably potentially through menopause, is try and build a resilient mindset. And I went, well, I am pretty resilient. She went, no, it actually means you need to look at the way that you're thinking of aging. You need to bring everything back to the present and look at yourself and actually look at the value in you, and then use those values and strengths to make decisions moving forward. And so I had to dig deep in that was the hardest work for me. Obviously managing symptoms was a bit of back and forth with the medical community to get me to feeling okay again, but the hard work was that, like, how do I perceive myself moving forward? How do I consider myself looking at myself potentially getting older, changing shape, not being able to be as capable as I was, and not believing I could be as capable as I was, which is the athletic ability thing you were talking about.
Yes.
And I had some incidences where I got nervous and didn't believe that I could do something like skiing down a hill. I actually had a tantrum on the hill and told my husband to go fuck himself, and then slid down on my bum, like it was like a proper tantrum. But then, I then was like, I'm going to do everything I can to bring back that belief in myself. And I actually think that that's one of the main messages I have for women, is that perimenopause can be a real troublesome transition, but you still can, and you still are capable. And I can sort of show you how. You can show them how. And once you get that belief back, then you're firing on all cylinders again, right?
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
We're going to end our conversation now. I know you have to go. I want to go through 3 glossary terms, because Amanda Thebe has her own dictionary, and you all out there may run into some of these words, and I want to make sure that you understand them as you read them or hear them. So if you could just give us a quick description of what these Thebisms mean, and then use them in a sentence, I would appreciate it. Let's start with fitness wankery. What does that mean?
So fitness wankery is interchangeable with wellness wankery. And so I would say you don't need to take menopause supplements from an MLM and network marketing. That's wellness wankery. That's fitness wankery.
Very good.
You don't have to avoid exercising for more than 30 minutes because you're going to get a fat belly. That's fitness wankery.
Thank you very much.
That's 2 sentences, right? Yeah.
The second one I heard you use on a podcast, and it was in reference to shortening your fitness routine, and a fitness snack. Give us the indication of what the fitness snack is, and how one might successfully execute the fitness snack.
Yeah, and I love fitness snacking, and it's something I talk about all the time. And it's essentially work where you are. Like, so we need to look for those small wins. It's part of building this resilient mindset. It's part of remembering how capable we are. We're all going to have bad days. It's not just menopause. Everyone should do this. You're not feeling quite yourself, but you've got a little something in you. Well, then do a fitness snack. Do like a 10-minute workout. Do something. It's the all or something mentality instead of the all or nothing mentality.
I love it. I love it. The third one, I had a hard time deciphering the second part of the word, so I'm gonna stab at it. I'm sure you'll know what it is. It is either cock wobble or cock womble.
Cock womble.
Okay, very, very good. I needed to know that, and help the people understand exactly what that is.
Well, it's not really a made-up term. It's probably more of a British-ism. So a cock is, a dick, an arse. And a womble is actually a really cute little furry figure from the UK TV show that used to collect litter in the Wombles of Wimbledon, they were called.
Very
But for some
nice.
reason, they're cute and adorable. But a
Mhm.
cockwomble is like literally the worst term I could call somebody that's not sort of really swearing. And so I used V Shred, who is this toxic marketer. It's actually a big corporation company that
Yes.
targets women, especially with Vince, who has his shirt off because Vince doesn't own a shirt apparently, and he's a cockwomble. So
Yes.
they're trying
Yes.
to take advantage of you. And so, yeah, and you
It's
know, when I wrote that post, it exploded, and it exploded because of that word and not because of the content. I was like, I put a lot of effort into finding out about this company.
Vince
Anyway, yeah.
has an allergic reaction in his nipples to any clothing that comes in contact with him. We've all seen that. Amanda Thebe, black belt, graphic designer, gateway to menopause understanding, humanitarian, my personal hero. Thank you for being here
Oh,
today and having a conversation with a brand new podcast, dude. I
oh my God,
sincerely
I'm so proud
appreciate you.
of you. I'm so proud of you. Look at you go.
Doing stuff. I'm doing it.
You're
I'm
doing
doing
it.
it.
You're doing it. And we need more of you. And you probably, before we finish, remember the post I did about should male trainers talk
Yeah.
about menopause? And I'm like, yes,
Yes.
yes, we need them. They have to be there. They're part of the conversation. It impacts them in some form or another. And, you know, if it's done ethically with support, then we please more of it. Right. So thank you for being part of that.
Because of the fact that you've done such incredible work over a span of your life, you're easily found through Google. But
Yeah.
would you do us the honor of just telling us how the listeners might best get in contact with you, to follow you, to learn from you, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, just go to amandathebe.com and it leads you to it's a gateway to all Amanda things in social media, the book, everything. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I'll give away these 3 copies of the book separately in a different live presentation. So we're going to let Amanda have her day back. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Looking forward to the next time that we get to have a conversation, my friend.
Thank you, Ren. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you.